Okay, so you see a headline like Hyundai dropping $21 billion in the U.S., and it makes you think.
Yeah.
There's got to be something bigger going on here, right?
Yeah.
This is more than just a new factory or two.
Right.
This feels like a really strong statement about where they think the future of cars is going.
Absolutely.
Technology, even just how we get around is all wrapped up in this.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to take a look at just what this massive investment by Hyundai in the United States really means.
That's right. And we've been digging through all the company announcements, all the expert analysis, and it really is a fascinating look at what Hyundai is aiming for.
Okay.
So for everyone listening, we're going to break down this $21 billion investment.
Okay.
Explore all of Hyundai's kind of cutting-edge tech plans and see how they stack up against the competition and what this could mean for the car industry in general and even for the U.S. economy.
Okay, so let's start with that $21 billion figure.
Sure.
That's a huge amount of money.
It is.
So where exactly is all that money going?
So a big chunk of it, $9 billion, is going directly into boosting their car production here in the U.S.
Okay.
They want to be able to make 1.2 million vehicles every year, and that means big upgrades to their factories in Alabama and Georgia.
Wow, so that's a big jump in production.
It is.
Sounds like they're really serious about building cars right here in the States.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's also talk about them investing in a steel plant.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
This is actually a really smart move strategically.
Yeah.
Hyundai is putting $5.8 billion into building a brand new steel plant down in Louisiana.
Wow.
And this isn't just about making more steel. This is going to create over 1,400 jobs.
Right.
And the key here is that this plant is going to focus on making the next generation of steel that they need specifically for their electric vehicles.
Oh, so they're not just getting more steel. They're getting the right kind of steel for EVs.
Exactly. It gives them more control over what goes into those cars, especially when it comes to making those EV chassis lighter and more efficient.
So it's like they're taking control of a core piece of their EV manufacturing.
Yeah.
And that has to mean lower costs and a more efficient process down the line.
Yeah, definitely.
So what else are they doing with this massive investment?
Okay, well, another big chunk, $6 billion, is going towards making more car parts here in the U.S.
Okay.
And this is really important as we shift towards electric vehicles.
Right.
A lot of this money is going to be used to make battery packs for their EVs right here, which strengthens their supply chain.
Yeah.
They're not as reliant on getting parts from overseas anymore.
And I think we've all seen lately how important that can be.
Absolutely.
So they're building up that domestic supply chain, which seems like a smart move to protect themselves from problems in the future.
Yep.
So what's the last piece of this $21 billion puzzle?
The rest of the money is going towards future technologies and the energy infrastructure that will be needed to support them. We're talking about things like self-driving cars, robotics, artificial intelligence, and even advanced air mobility. So think like flying cars.
Wow.
It's clear that Hyundai is thinking about more than just what they're doing. Now they're making big bets on what transportation will look like in the future.
So it's not just about doing more of what they're already doing. It's about changing direction.
Yeah.
Pivoting towards a different future for transportation.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does this investment in the U.S. line up with global trade and with Hyundai's overall goals?
It's interesting because it seems like this investment is their response to changes in U.S. trade policy.
Okay.
By making so much here in the U.S., they might be able to avoid some of those tricky tariffs and really cement their place in the North American market.
So it's like a long-term commitment to doing business in the U.S.
It is.
Not just keeping up, but staying ahead of the game.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about these future technologies.
Sure.
What level of self-driving are they aiming for?
They're working on what's called Level 4 autonomy. And for those listening, that means the car can pretty much drive itself in most situations.
Wow.
A driver can take over if they need to, but the car can handle almost everything on its own.
So the car's pretty much in charge.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's a big step.
It is.
What other cool tech stuff are they working on?
Another big thing is SDVs, or software-defined vehicles.
Okay.
Hyundai wants to be able to send over-the-air updates, or OTAs, to all their cars around the world by 2025.
Interesting.
It's like how your phone gets updates and new features, so your car can keep getting better and better even after you buy it.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-time purchase anymore.
Right. It's like a service that keeps evolving.
Exactly.
So that changes the whole ownership experience.
It does, yeah.
It's not just about the hardware anymore. It's about what the software can do.
Right.
Now let's talk about their electric vehicle strategy.
Sure.
That seems to be a big part of this whole investment.
It is a big part.
They're aiming to sell 2 million EVs every year by 2030.
That's right.
That's a big number.
It is. And to get there, they're not only increasing how many cars they can make, but they're also spending a lot of money on developing new EV models that can go further on a single charge.
Yeah, I think range anxiety is still a big thing for people who are thinking about getting an EV.
Yeah,
So having EVs that can go further is really important.
absolutely.
Now, I know Hyundai has also been involved with hydrogen technology.
Yeah.
How does that fit into their plans for the future?
Hyundai is still a leader in hydrogen technology, and they're really investing in the whole process, from making hydrogen to storing it and then using it in cars and even in other industries.
Interesting.
They're working towards creating a whole hydrogen ecosystem.
Okay.
They see it as another way to achieve sustainable mobility.
So they're not just focusing on battery-powered EVs.
No,
They're looking at hydrogen, too.
that's right.
Which makes sense because there are different situations where each technology might be better.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned robotics and advanced air mobility earlier.
I did.
Tell me more about those.
Hyundai is thinking outside the traditional car market. They're exploring robotics, especially with their acquisition of Boston Dynamics.
Oh, wow.
And they're investing in advanced air mobility, which includes developing electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, so basically flying cars.
Flying cars. That's really thinking ahead.
Yeah.
What about batteries?
Yeah.
What advancements are they working on there?
They're really focused on making batteries more affordable and safer,
Yeah.
which is really important for getting more people to switch to EVs
Right.
and to address some of the concerns that people have about battery technology.
It sounds like they have a really comprehensive plan,
They do.
covering all the different aspects of how we'll get around in the future.
Yeah.
So how does Hyundai compare to other car companies when it comes to innovation?
Hyundai's really made a name for itself in some key areas.
Okay.
For example, they're a leader in electrification with their goal of selling 2 million EVs by 2030,
Right.
and their investments in both battery and hydrogen technology. They're right up there with companies like Tesla.
So they're not just going along with the EV trend.
No.
They're trying to shape it.
Exactly. And when you look at software-defined vehicles, their plan to roll out over-the-air updates for all their cars by 2025.
Right.
And they're talking about an open operating system for autonomous driving
Oh, wow.
that puts them ahead of many traditional car companies who are just starting to figure out how to integrate software at that level.
So they're thinking about making it easier for others to contribute to autonomous driving development.
Yeah, it could be a game changer for the industry.
And their moves in robotics and advanced air mobility are pretty forward-thinking,
They are.
especially compared to companies like Toyota and Ford, who haven't
Yeah.
made such big commitments in those areas.
Yeah, they're really willing to explore new territory.
What about their luxury brand, Genesis?
Yeah.
How does their tech stack up against the competition there?
Genesis is a big part of Hyundai's plan to compete with the luxury brands like BMW and Mercedes-Benz. They're offering similar high-tech features and a luxury experience, but often at a better price.
So they're using technology to make their luxury cars more appealing.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about sustainability.
Of course.
How does Hyundai compare to its rivals in that area?
Hyundai is doing a lot to be more sustainable, not just in their cars, but also in how they make them.
Okay.
They're using hydrogen technology in their factories,
Wow.
and they're serious about reducing their carbon footprint. They're actually ahead of some other car companies in this area.
So it sounds like Hyundai is pushing boundaries across the board,
Yeah, they are.
from basic EV tech to things that seem like they're straight out of science fiction.
Yeah.
Let's highlight a few of their recent innovations.
Okay.
The Ion IQ5, with its level 4 self-driving capabilities, is a good example of how far they've come in that area.
Yeah, that's not just talk. It's real technology they're testing and using.
And their plan to switch to software-defined vehicles with over-the-air updates by 2025 is a huge change.
It is.
It's going to change how we own and interact with our cars.
Absolutely.
And they're talking about new EV models with ranges over 900 kilometers.
Yeah.
That would be incredible.
That could really convince people to switch to EVs.
And we should mention their work in hydrogen fuel cell technology, robotics, with Boston Dynamics, flying cars, and better batteries.
Yeah, they're not betting on just one thing. They're exploring all kinds of new technologies.
So with all these advancements, what would you say are Hyundai's biggest advantages right now?
Well, they've been recognized as the most innovative volume brand for autonomous driving and ADAS,
Oh, wow.
which is a big deal. It means the industry sees them as leaders in this area.
That's a serious accomplishment.
It is.
And their commitment to software-defined vehicles is another big advantage.
Absolutely. They're leading the way in terms of integrating software into cars.
And they're unusual in that they're pursuing both hydrogen and battery electric vehicles.
Yeah, they're not just picking one, they're exploring both options.
And that gives them a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, it does.
And let's not forget about their investments in robotics and advanced air mobility.
Those are really setting them apart from companies like Ford and GM.
They're thinking way beyond traditional cars.
Yeah, they are.
It seems like they're also really focused on the user experience with things like BlueLink and the Mycation subscription program.
That's right. They're not just focused on the tech itself. They want to make sure people have a good experience using it.
Now, it's hard not to compare Hyundai to Tesla,
Right.
which is often seen as the big player in EVs and tech.
Yeah.
So how do they compare?
Well, when it comes to range, Tesla has usually had the edge. Their cars can go further on a single charge.
Okay.
But Hyundai is catching up, and they have an advantage when it comes to charging.
How so?
They use an 800V system, which means their cars can charge much faster than Tesla's if you can find a compatible charger.
So Tesla might take you further, but a Hyundai can get you back on the road quicker.
Exactly.
What about self-driving? How do they approach that?
Tesla relies a lot on cameras, AI, and the data they get from all the Teslas on the road.
Okay.
Hyundai is also investing in AI, but they're taking a more gradual approach, improving their driver assistance systems.
So two different philosophies about how to achieve self-driving.
That's right.
And what about batteries?
Tesla makes their own batteries. They're called 4680 cells, and they're designed to be more efficient and cheaper to make.
Okay.
Hyundai gets its batteries from different suppliers, and they're focused on making sure those batteries are affordable, safe, and reliable.
And the designs of the cars themselves are quite different.
Yeah, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, for example, has a retro-futuristic look. It's spacious inside, and it has 2 screens, but it still has physical buttons for some things.
Yeah.
Teslas are known for their minimalist interiors with almost everything controlled through a big touchscreen.
Two very different approaches.
Yeah.
And of course, Hyundai is also moving into areas like robotics and advanced air mobility where Tesla isn't really present.
Exactly. Their work with Boston Dynamics and their flying car projects are things that Tesla isn't really doing.
And what about sustainability?
Both companies care about sustainability, but they have different focuses.
Okay.
Tesla is all about battery electric vehicles and solar energy.
Right.
Hyundai is doing that too, but they're also putting a lot of effort into hydrogen, and they're working on a hydrogen ecosystem.
So they both want to be green, but they're going about it in different ways.
Exactly.
So Hyundai's $21 billion investment is big,
It is.
but other car companies are investing a lot of money in the U.S. too.
They are.
How does Hyundai's investment compare?
Well, General Motors is actually investing even more, around $60 billion, with a big focus on EVs and batteries.
Wow.
Ford is spending $5.6 billion on a new EV factory in Tennessee.
Okay.
Toyota is putting $3.4 billion into battery production in the U.S., and they're focusing on both hybrids and EVs.
Right.
Stellantis is spending $2.5 billion on a battery factory with Samsung.
Okay.
And Volkswagen is investing in their factory in Chattanooga to make EVs for North America.
So everyone is jumping on the EV bandwagon.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what makes Hyundai's investment stand out?
It's really about how broad their plan is. They're not just focused on EVs and batteries.
Okay.
They're building that steel plant, remember?
Yeah, which gives them control over that part of the supply chain.
Exactly.
And they're investing in things like self-driving cars, robotics, and flying cars, which shows they're thinking long-term.
Yeah, they're not just reacting to the current trends, they're trying to create the future.
So what does this mean for the car market as a whole?
Well, this is going to make competition a lot tougher.
Okay.
Hyundai's doing so much in EVs, robotics, and flying cars that other companies will have to step up their game.
So it's like a wake-up call for the industry.
Yeah.
What about the move towards more sustainable transportation?
Hyundai's focus on both hydrogen and EVs is going to speed up that transition.
Okay.
It's going to change what people expect from cars.
Right. And push other companies to offer more environmentally friendly options.
Absolutely.
And what about technology in general? Things like software and self-driving cars.
Hyundai is setting a new standard with their software-defined vehicles and their advances in self-driving technology.
Okay.
Other companies are going to have to catch up.
Yeah. With their robotics and air mobility projects, Hyundai is almost redefining what it means to be a car company.
Yeah, they're not limiting themselves to just making cars and trucks anymore.
And all of this investment in the U.S. is going to have a big economic impact.
Yeah, it will create jobs and help the U.S. economy.
So it's clear that Hyundai's investment is going to have a ripple effect.
Yeah,
It's not just about them, it's about the whole car industry and even the U.S. economy.
definitely.
Now, Hyundai isn't just investing in the U.S.
Right.
What are they doing in other parts of the world?
Well, in South Korea, they're still investing a lot in research and development for EVs, hydrogen technology, and self-driving cars.
Okay.
They're building new EV factories and expanding their hydrogen infrastructure. So Korea is still their home base for innovation.
So Korea is still a hub for their advanced tech?
Yeah.
What about other markets?
They've invested over $4 billion in India, building factories and research centers.
Wow.
In Europe, they're making EVs in places like the Czech Republic and Turkey, and they have R&D centers in Germany.
Yep.
They're also active in China, focusing on electric and efficient vehicles that are right for the Chinese market.
Right.
And they're expanding in Southeast Asia with a $1.55 billion EV factory in Indonesia.
Wow.
And they're even investing in hydrogen infrastructure in Australia.
So this big investment in the U.S. is part of a much larger global strategy.
It is, yeah.
It's just one piece of their worldwide plan for the future of transportation.
That's right.
So let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Hyundai's $21 billion investment in the U.S. is a huge deal, but it's about a lot more than just making cars.
Yeah, it's a multi-layered strategy that includes boosting production, building a new steel plant, securing their supply chain, and making big bets on future technologies.
And they're really becoming a leader in key areas.
Yeah.
Like fast charging for EVs, software-defined vehicles, robotics, and hydrogen technology.
Right. And while companies like Tesla are doing great things too, Hyundai is going about it differently.
Yeah.
They're taking a more diverse and comprehensive approach.
And this investment is going to shake things up in the car industry.
It is.
It's going to make competition fiercer, push everyone towards sustainability, and accelerate technological innovation.
Absolutely. And it's going to change what we think of when we think of a car company.
Yeah.
With Hyundai moving into robotics and air mobility, the lines are getting blurred.
Exactly. So here's something to think about. Given everything Hyundai is doing and how they're pushing into areas beyond traditional cars, what other industries might be disrupted or changed by the car industry in the next 10 years. It really makes you think about the ripple effects of a company like Hyundai and the impact they can have on the world.
It does.
All right, thanks for joining me for this deep dive into Hyundai's big move.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time.
See you.